Big tech is acting kinda dodgy at the moment.
Welcome to another episode of Cold Fusion. Over the last 5 years, big tech has received valuations that far exceed anything observed in human.
Elon Musk becoming the first trillionaire. And Zuck over here, what the hell is up with these glasses? This is another thing that I do not like about a lot of tech bros, is that, I mean, Mr. Musk here probably looks the most normal out of any of them. But the whole slumming it with the t-shirts and the hipster glasses and Mr. Nvidia man over here, I mean, nice haircut, decent glasses. The biker jacket, though, I mean, it kind of makes him look like a Bond villain. It really does. And the glasses, they just make Mark Zuckerberg look gay.
In history. It's the kind of growth that under possibly different circumstances, people would likely celebrate. Conventionally speaking, higher valuations mean better pensions, a better standard of living, and a sign of a prosperous economy. But of course, when the
Pensions? What are those? You don't get no stinking pensions.
market gets too hot and euphoria explodes, it can be more of a warning sign.
In late June of 2026, the Bank of International Settlements, an international financial institution owned by the central banks of the world, ushered a stark warning. AI spending and circular financing has gotten so out of control that it's becoming a risk to the economy. Big tech.
Let's read that again. Reversal of excessive tech investments could have serious economic consequences. Debt-fueled spending on AI, driving up the risk of a global financial crisis. Excessive spending on new AI data centers and opaque transactions risk financial meltdown, similar to the global credit crunch nearly 2 decades ago. Yes, a lot of irrational exuberance over data centers, to the point where everybody is just sort of scaling back on everything. I mean, they're still going to build data centers, just not these massive projects that they talked about in the media, which I kind of have to wonder if that wasn't part of some sort of fundraising campaign on their part, a way to raise some capital by getting some hype out there in the media. Then again, if you have to do something like that, it's like, what? I mean, what? Normally, if you've got a sound business idea, something that makes financial sense to invest in, you don't have to go to Bloomberg and CNBC and the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal and everywhere else to plug that sort of thing. You go to sort of private circles of accredited and sophisticated investors with lots and lots and lots and lots of money to blow on these sorts of things, and you just put your proposal to them. Oftentimes, it's going to be some sort of deck presentation, some sort of slide deck presentation, coupled with a booklet full of lots of fluff, a couple of charts that is really the meat and potatoes and the only thing that most of those people are going to be interested in. And if you're projecting, at least on the conservative end, the type of returns they're looking for, then they're going to invest money in you. And if, you know, all the numbers and all the figures and all the charts and everything makes sense, then you get your money and you go make the business and do the thing. And if you don't, well, you don't get the money. Alec, welcome in. Good to see you. How are you?
Financing has gotten so out of control that it's becoming a risk to the economy. Big tech is in a weird position at the moment. It's gone from driving the economy to putting it at risk. And the latest fuel added to the fire, Chinese AI models. They've closed the performance gap drastically and are approaching good enough for most AI applications.
Have they, though? I question that. Anytime it's something that comes out of the Chinese. I mean, granted, they're fairly decent at reverse engineering just about anything, but I have to wonder how good it really is. I would need time playing with something like Opus AI to really make sure. And I would need to hear the analysis and tire kicking from people I trust before I would just take this as gospel. Doing well, that's good, that's good. Output tokens get roughly 21x cheaper from Opus 4.8 to Minimax M3 While measured capability barely moves, you paid a fortune for the last few points. Each teardrop is 5x cheaper, barely less capable. That really is going to be, I think, the new frontier with AI. Yes, there's a lot of potential in its capabilities, but it is quite resource hungry. That's going to be, I think, the big challenge, is making it far more efficient, especially from an energy standpoint. Anyone who can crack that code, they stand to make a fortune. That's my view of it anyway. That's my view. Those who can make AI more efficient, where it doesn't use as much electricity, doesn't use as much resources on a computer, doesn't require as massive of a data center to use, something that's just really clean and efficient. I think that's where the money lies. Cracking that code, though, there's the challenge. But you don't have to do it alone. You can use AI to make AI more efficient. I mean, what a concept, right?
While being multiple times cheaper. You can download these models yourself, use them without an internet connection, be 100% in control of your data, and tweak the weights however you like. American companies have started to realize this, and they're switching. Just look at the massive change in the AI landscape in the past.
Yeah, that's another thing. An AI that can operate locally doesn't have to be online. So many of these big AI models, ChatGPT, Grok, they all require an active internet connection. But if you can get the same or similar results with an AI that operates locally on a device, doesn't necessarily have to connect to the internet unless it needs to, to do a search or whatever, that's good. That's a positive development. And it also means less resources used.
Year. The yellow bar is American AI companies, and the grey bar is Chinese. And it's not just small companies making the switch either. Cursor, Coinbase, Shopify, Airbnb, Uber Eats, Siemens, and even Microsoft are switching to open source and open weight models. Nothing is for certain, but to me, this seems catastrophic to the central business case of the AI boom.
If Chinese models are 80 to 90% as good as the leading AI companies exist at 20% of the cost, how are the trillions in data center spending going to pay off? That's the neat part. They won't. They won't. That's probably why all these companies that were talking about building these massive data centers have started scaling back on so much of that. The AI is going open source now, and people are starting to figure out how to make this more efficient. So they don't really need all that, do they?
What's the trillions of dollars in spending for if the promised future revenue is already vanishing? To be clear, I still do think that AI will be revolutionary in the
Wait a minute,
is
what was
already
that down
vanishing.
We're not going to get into the discussion of how China stole the LLM performance of US companies through a distillation process. It's strictly an economic argument. I mean, what haven't the Chinese stolen and reverse engineered for their own benefit?
To be clear, I still do think that AI will be revolutionary in the long term. Coding and healthcare applications are already showing promise, and the systems are still improving, but I just think the industry has mispriced LLMs due to excessive hype.
Beyond the recent collapse of data center projects, there's a lot of problems with LLMs when they meet the real world. This one is key and basically sums up everything. A survey of nearly 2,500 companies found that for every dollar spent on AI, only 18 cents makes it into production. The rest of the money spent disappears into fixing what the AI got wrong. That could be fixing AI-generated bugs, reworking what the AI has done, or just overall friction.
So much of every dollar, nearly half of it, devoted to fixing bugs. I mean, granted, there's going to be bugs in any type of tech, no matter what you do, but that's a lot of tinkering that they're having to do just to squeeze out 18 cents in profit. Data centers are also seeing increased opposition locally, which is being funded via the Chinese too. Yes, none of that is organic. And all the people pushing for opposition to construction of data centers, they are effectively useful idiots. You're doing the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. Never forget that, chat. Never forget that. All of this opposition to data centers, this is all just the Chinese trying to make sure they get a competitive advantage. It's sort of like how the Chinese pushed things like BLM and DEI and all these other things. You know, they sank a lot of money and influence into all of that. Why? To just kind of fuck with the West and, again, give themselves a competitive advantage. Lots of propaganda about DC resource usage and impact. Yes.
Any other technology with a return on investment this poor would be thrown out as trash, but yet the money keeps piling in. Even the top AI CEOs appear to be backpedaling on their language. Sam Altman himself said that he was delighted to be wrong when it came to his predictions of an AI-driven job apocalypse. Some analysts are terrified that this market has gone beyond a bubble, and this is all actually a sign that the economy itself is essentially broken.
They're just now figuring this out. They're just now figuring out what you and I, here on the ground floor, on the street, have known for some time. That the economy is broken, that everything is in a bubble, and that we need to deflate that bubble in order for things to get cheaper and more affordable, and so that we finally have some cash to, things are finally affordable to us that we can just fucking live. And you know the Chinese are going to use AI the smart way. They'll use AI to further their own interests, which I suppose in their view is the smart way. In the event of an AI bubble pop, the power generation infrastructure will remain, increasing grid capacity. That is one good thing that comes out of building all these data centers, is that I think the ones that stand to get increased odds of approval are the ones that generate their own power, which that is possible. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable demand from any tech company, for any tech company, from the municipalities that they want to build in. It's like, okay, big tech company, you want to come in and build a data center over here on this, you know, farmland or out in the middle of nowhere. That's fine. That's fine. But we've got a power plant here that needs upgrading. We need to increase capacity in the electrical grid if we're going to if we're going to have you build and operate this within our city limits. So you're going to have to give back. You want the electricity, you're going to have to pay for the increase in capacity, or you're just going to have to generate it on site yourself. That sounds reasonable to me. Only the most heavily bribed, bought off sort of politicians would object. Would just say, oh yeah, our citizens who live here, that are at risk of having brownouts and rolling blackouts in order for this data center to operate, yeah, fuck them. That is the sort of thing on the local level that can cost someone the election, and rightly so. We expect an AI bubble pop, but the survivors would ingest the losers' infrastructure anyway. Yeah, it's got to go somewhere. Google's main AI guy, Geoffrey Hinton, pulled the alarm and warned of the dangers of the current AI programs Google was working on back in 2023 and was more or less ignored. They always are. He also quit Google. He was the guy which the media had previously nicknamed the godfather of AI. Prophets are never appreciated in their own time. In fact, you go back to the biblical view of the prophets, and a lot of the prophets in the Old Testament, yeah, so many of them were shunned socially, and many of them were often murdered by angry mobs. The grid's incapable of supporting the DC rush without the 1930s level where each facility must generate its own power because the grid cannot support. Yeah, we've been needing a massive overhaul of the electrical grid and expansion of it for some time. I mean, there is an opportunity here to push for more nuclear power. I think we're finally getting to a point where we can overcome those rather irrational fears of Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, which Chernobyl, well, that's just because communists are idiots that don't know how to manage infrastructure and much of anything properly. 3 Mile Island was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was an accident. It was contained, and the freak out about it was completely and totally disproportionate, and America in particular has never recovered. And it's also been used as a pretense to shut down nuclear plants in Europe in favor of these absolute bollocks green programs that, well, surprise, surprise, Europe gets pretty cold in the winter, and so that green grid, whatever it is, it doesn't work. The day AI crashes is the day the US is going to scream like a little girl and go, no, how do I do things? I mean, we might actually see that. We might actually see a time where a big AI provider just goes dark and people are just completely bewildered and at a loss. I know there was one sort of artificial intelligence companion app, got a lot of venture capital funding, and the company just sort of nerfed it. A lot of people were having rather intimate conversations with this AI as their companions, and then all of a sudden they just noticed, oh, it's like it's been lobotomized, and we can't have dirty talk with it anymore. And a lot of people lost their shit over that. And I don't think that particular AI companion app company ever recovered from that. They're already talking about nationalizing all AI tech industry here in Denmark. I don't think the government of Denmark knows what they're doing with AI tech. So nationalizing it, that could be a mistake. I think one way they could speed up AI processing is by paying people to sit in a chair all day and work as a bioprocessor. That's probably getting into Matrix territory, where people are basically living in pods. I don't think any of us want to go there. I don't think we want to go there and do that. They don't know anything about anything. The nationalized oil industry. Yeah, government never does. Nationalization rarely, if ever, works out.
In this episode, we see how big tech is behaving strangely. There's a lot of money being thrown around with not much to show for it.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
Oh, is that what we're watching? I wasn't quite sure.
Moving
how
into
we
the
got here.
2010s, compared to today, most tech investment was so slow moving that it might as well have been a corpse. Aside from the significant investor interest in
Yeah, 2010s, I think everyone was still kind of reeling from the dot-com bubble bursting in 99, 2000. So, yeah, everyone was still incredibly skittish about any sort of tech investment because they didn't want another dot-com bubble burst. And the fear was, and especially 2010s, we were just coming off of the 2008 financial crisis on top of that. So yeah, a lot of people scared shitless. A lot of people went broke. And so just like, yeah, no, we're only going to bet on a sure thing.
Apple's iPhone and the App Store release, or Amazon's logistical brilliance and faster deliveries. The idea of big tech looked like it was taking a back seat. One of the biggest stories to come out about Google, now Alphabet, in 2012, was how a Google research team created a neural network out of 1,600 computer processors. They tried to mimic the functions of the human brain. After 3 days of training on YouTube videos,
That was probably the brainchild of someone like Ray Kurzweil, who has been pushing quite aggressively in the remaining years of his life to towards a sort of technological singularity to increase computing power and capability to the point where it is on the level of the human brain.
they successfully got their network to identify the difference between a toaster and a cat. While that
Monumental work in the beginning, but once you hit those milestones, it's almost like humans with the 4-minute mile. Used to be, it was thought impossible for a human being to run 1 mile in 4 minutes. You had scientists and medical professionals saying it's not physically possible. The human body itself would just break apart. You'd explode into a million pieces if you tried to do that. And then someone did it. And then more people did it. And I think it's to the point where people are not just running a mile in under 4 minutes. Something like 3.5 minutes now, I think I can't remember exactly what the record was. But, and the person who first broke the 4-minute mile was I don't even remember who the athlete was. He was really good. Not exactly exceptional, but in a sense proved that if he could do it, anyone can, with enough time and practice. Ironically, our energy output means we're terrible batteries for the giant evil AI, but great processors due to energy efficiency to computing ratios. Yeah, we're still good for something, and that makes me nervous.
Was impressive at the time, it wasn't exactly the next big thing that everyday people were pumped about. Though by the turn of the decade, the 6 largest tech companies, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta and Nvidia, had a combined reported revenue exceeding $1 trillion. But their valuation by the end of 2020 was almost $8 trillion. By the end of 2025, this had blown up to $20 trillion, and now it's over $23 trillion. In fact,
$23 trillion. That's more than you and I and most people, I think, in the Western world could ever hope to make or generate in all of our lifetimes combined. That's just a staggering amount of money. And at some point, it just becomes so ridiculous that you just have to ask yourself, it's like, I mean, what are they really doing that's worth $20 to $23 trillion? I mean, really?
this growth is so monumental that many believe that the bullish tech sector is the only part of the American economy that's keeping everything from a massive recession.
Could be, but we're also quite overdue for a recession. And all of the measures that have been taken to prevent that is just, they're just delaying the inevitable. Boom and bust cycles are actually quite normal, but we've got these hypersensitive voting blocks that are quite dependent upon the stock market with their retirement accounts and their 401ks and all of that lovely good stuff that, basically they're never allowed to have a bad day on the market.
But if the current tech boom is a bubble, why does the market at least seem to be behaving differently than in the past? One of the main reasons is likely to do with AI and the construction of data centers. They've meaningfully contributed to a rise in global GDP. Analysts like Harvard's John Furman have recently spoken out about how this likely contributes to an overwhelming majority of US GDP, and how it really warps the sense of how good or bad things are.
You can just add up what went into GDP or into demand in the first half of the year, and 92% of the increase in it came from just 2 categories of GDP: information processing systems and software, which is to say the stuff going into data centers.
Everything else just is not even a blip on the radar. Everything else is not even a blip on the radar. It kind of shows that we're just sort of lumbering along, and we're not really growing. The growth is all fake and gay. And so we kind of need a recession at this point to reset everything, to get rid of the dross and the rot gut and everything else that is just that is just calcified in the economy. It all just needs to be cleaned away. But no, that's not a vote getter, and that might cost some people the election. So, and not only that, certain generations have just got into their head that they're never allowed to have a bad day on the market.
Hearing this, it's almost gotten to the point where GDP appears to be a broken indicator of economic prosperity, especially when considering much of this.
I don't think it ever really was. Do you, Chart? GDP is just another form of big line go up, money printer go burr.
Quote, production and consumption is being driven by the same companies that are reaching unprecedented valuations. And this ties into the whole circular financing idea, which I'm sure you've heard before.
Oh yeah, this is interesting. So let's hang on a minute.
And this ties into the whole circular financing idea.
Yeah, okay. So perhaps you've seen this before, Chart, but it's kind of been a rumor of sorts that, a certain amount in the billions of dollars is just sort of being passed around between these different tech companies: Microsoft, Oracle, CoreWeave, Amazon, Google, Anthropic, X, AMD, OpenAI, Nvidia. They're all just sort of passing the same amounts of money around to each other. Kalergi, thank you for the follow over on Twitch. Thank you, thank you. GDP is a sham business. It's the same as unemployment. It's just a number, and how they get to that number can be tinkered with, and it's to the point where it's just garbage in, garbage out. But yes, it's been rumored for some time that a lot of the big companies are just sort of passing around the same billions of dollars to each other through investments or through contracts or through sales or through, you know, purchase in equity. And it's all just sort of getting passed around to make it look like there's big economic activity. But in reality, there's nothing there. It's all fake. You're just taking the same amount of money and just passing it around to each other and hoping that nobody will notice. Only people are starting to notice.
Which I'm sure you've heard before.
A precarious investment.
It sort of reminds me of dead internet theory. So much of the internet just dead. Nobody really looking at web pages or anything like that. They're just sort of, you know, it's all there, all this content getting published, and then nobody's watching it, or the only thing that's watching it are bots and AI.
Strategy is emerging.
Multi-billion-dollar circular deals.
The merry-go-round of money continues.
Huge sums of money are just being passed between these enormous companies that are...
If it were anyone else, if it were not these tech companies, but any other big corporation out there with enough money to buy politicians and influence in the halls of power, we would refer to this as money laundering.
are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into the promise of AI.
As the cracks between valuations and the reality on the ground start to get wider in 2026, the behaviour of big tech becomes stranger with it. It's possible that a lot of these recent earnings and valuations are artificial. In other words, a lot of these companies could be playing clever accounting tricks so that the average investor believes that everything is fine.
We're just now sort of figuring this out. We're thinking just because they're the flavor of the month, the big new thing, that somehow they don't do spurious accounting tricks. What a woefully naive thing to believe. No, I refuse to believe there's not an organic competition between all the mainstream corporate entities. One group of people can't own everything that controls the manufacturing. That's just some crazy conspiracy theory. Right, that's madness. They need to loosen the tinfoil hat.
I'm going to play a clip from two forensic accountants, John Weil and Kevin Kohaki. It runs for a couple of minutes, but I want you to listen closely to what they're saying. They really dissect the financial engineering and tricks of the hyperscalers. It's major companies like Microsoft and Google. Basically, when you crunch the numbers, they don't make any money.
And for those of you who aren't already familiar with John's work, he is basically the GOAT of accounting-driven reporting, and he's been doing it since the days of Enron and WorldCom.
I've got a story for you about...
So he would know about dodgy accounting tricks. I like going around old forums which have posts going back to 2003 or earlier, like the Fedora Lounge. The London Lounge is no longer open to non-users, so can't casually lurk in there anymore. Real annoyance is how difficult Google makes it to find older websites and forums. Yeah, no, they want you focused on the big new thing. It's all a big racket. They all meet in Geneva and a few other small towns, in Schweiz in Belgium. Yes, I believe that's, what is that, normally where the Davos people and World Economic Forum and Bilderberg Group and all of that tend to gather together. Bilderberg Group is over 1,000 of the world's largest corporations and leaders meet under one roof. Yeah. Anyone remember when Alex Jones used to always try to go to the Bilderberg conference and try to crash it? I remember that. Isn't that what they call racketeering? Yeah, probably. And the big new thing is same 5 social media websites and only alternatives being big mainstream media websites and streaming services. Yeah. Yeah, they want you focusing on the big boys. And they don't want to give any attention or direct anyone to upstarts and potential new competitors.
About companies that are completely overstating their earnings, aren't profitable. You can see that, well, they start off with overstating.
Enron and WorldCom.
I've got a story for you about companies that are completely overstating their earnings, aren't profitable. You can see that, well, they start off with X amount of net income, and it looks really impressive. And then you look at all their capital, you look at their cash flow, it still looks impressive. Then you look at how much their capital investments are, CapEx it's often called. Then you say, oh, it looks less impressive. They're spending a lot of money on data centers. And then you have to take into account the cash costs of stock-based compensation and then buybacks that are related to the actual stock-based payments themselves. You take those two elements and now you're down to like almost no earnings.
So people are kind of taking the money, trying to cash out now. And then I guess they just sort of make their way to the exits when everything starts to burn down.
Almost no free cash flow.
It's insane to think that just 5 years ago, before the AI boom, these companies...
Let's see, next hyperscaler free cash flow projection. And it's all just trending down. Meanwhile, you've got the benchmark S&P 500 over here, expected to just keep on an upward trend. Which, by the way, chat, we should mention, we're not offering any sort of investment advice here. I mean, if you think going to a VTuber stream who's reacting to a cold fusion video to get financial advice is somehow a good idea, you're an idiot. Don't do that. Consult with a financial advisor, someone who actually knows what the fuck they're doing. I remember last year, I think O'Keefe snuck into Davos, the World Economic Forum meeting. His disguise was little more than going blonde and wearing sunglasses and a suit. Yeah, he's very low effort with his disguises, and it's amazing that people actually fall for it.
were printing cash.
The free cash flow for the big tech names just falls off of a cliff. Meanwhile, the rest of the S&P, it continues, not because they're not making lots of money, but because they're spending ridiculous amounts of money.
But wouldn't that drag down the S&P 500? I think it would, especially if it's the stock of big tech companies. That could crater the value of the S&P quite easily. Clown Thriller, welcome in. Good to see you. Yeah, it's not looking good, chat. It's not looking good.
On these data centers specifically, and those names have been falling.
It's like, what's the next step for them? They're spending a lot of money. They used to be free cash flow machines. They're not free cash flow machines anymore.
I mean, eventually they run out of cash. Cash is a very finite thing. It's almost like what the Berliner Statue used to say about socialism. The problem with it is eventually you run out of other people's money. Somewhat similar problem going on here. The tech companies, they're running out of cash. Is there going to be a recession again? Probably. When? I have no idea. I always figured it's when the size of the population of boomers in the United States and in most of the Western world finally gets to a low enough level, basically when enough boomers die, probably we'll see a rug pull. And then it's like, yeah, recession. Millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, yeah, fuck all of you. You get to deal with the problem now. I still maintain that, yeah, when enough of the boomer cohort has passed on, that's probably when we're going to see a big recession. Because they're the ones that all of this has been propped up for. They're the ones that they're not allowed to have a bad day on the market because they're the ones that vote. And they're the ones that have the largest amount of assets and investments compared to Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z. I want to say, and I could be completely wrong about that, I think boomers have got more assets and more money invested than all of the younger generations combined. We're in for a rough ride. We probably are. Again, we're not making any sort of specific predictions, and certainly not offering financial advice. Again, don't get your financial and investing advice from VTubers. If you do that, you're an idiot and you deserve to lose your money. Consult with a financial advisor, someone who actually knows what they're doing, please.
To start our exploration, let's begin with the incestuous relationship between Google and Anthropic. Google's first quarterly profits of 2026 reported an 82% increase, which is roughly a $28 billion increase from the last quarter of 2025. The headlines attribute this, as well as a 77% jump in Amazon, to the rise of their cloud units. But if this was true, isn't it rather odd that Google has been quietly laying off staff in its cloud division too?
Yeah. I mean, if they're going great guns, why are they laying off people? Typically, you only lay off staff if things aren't going so well. You don't do layoffs when times are good. That just wouldn't make any sense.
Quote, reinvest in growth areas such as AI, end quote. And it only gets stranger when you realize that Google's income statements attribute the root cause of this profit jump as, quote, other income. A sudden magical sum of money coming in labeled as other income is kind of like catching your teenage son having $10,000 in the family shared bank account. So,
yeah, that's just like other income. What is this other income? This is the sort of thing that would it not Google, any other company would be getting audited for this. Thank you for the Watch Street, Clown Thriller. Thank you for the 20 streams. Well done.
How'd you get that money, son? I don't know. A classmate gave it to me. Like a disappointed...
That's a good way to get yourself audited. That's, if it were anybody else, they'd be audited, they'd be investigated for some type of fraud or money laundering. But because it's Google and because it's Anthropic, they're just like, all right.
Father, let's look into Google's shared bank account. We find that in April of 2026, Google has been consistently pumping tens of billions of dollars into Anthropic, and there's no signs of slowing down. 1 month after Google announced their series of investments into Anthropic, in May of 2026, Anthropic conveniently announced that they've committed to spend $200 billion with Google's cloud over the next 5 years. But what makes this even more interesting is that, at least on Google's cloud over the next
200 billion plus the Google Cloud backlog, 460 billion. So just that's nearly $750 billion. That is an insane amount of money. Yeah, there's always companies that are too big to fail that never get investigated. Yeah, until they possibly do something to piss off the wrong people, and then they do get investigated, and then brings down the whole thing, sort of like what happened with Enron.
5 years. But what makes this even more interesting is that, at least on paper, these two companies should be rivals in the AI space. Looking even deeper, a virtually identical pattern is found with Amazon as well. And there's so many examples of this, deals and money flowing between different AI companies, who often should be rivals.
Yeah, that's any other industry. That would not be okay. This is the sort of behavior that things like airlines try to do. A lot of US airlines tried to do that. I think it was the CEO of, who was it, American Airlines and Delta, or yeah, it was two big airline CEOs getting together over cocktails or something like that. And they're just out now started talking. It's like, yeah, we need to set certain prices at these levels, and we can't let them fall any lower than that. Otherwise, we're not going to make as much in profit. And, you over here at our competitor, you're going to have to do the same thing, because, we all need to make money here. We all need to be successful. You can't have those conversations. This is one of those things where freedom of speech protections do not apply. You're not allowed to collude on things like that. And that's really what this is looking like, is collusion on a biblical scale. Any other business, it has resulted in criminal prosecutions, civil prosecutions, people going to prison, companies and people having to pay massive fines, new regulations being introduced. But because it's OpenAI and NVIDIA and Oracle and Intel, government's just like, no, carry on. This is the problem where companies don't want to make changes to improve the product, but instead try to rig the market in their favor. Yeah, never fails. It's like, yeah, you could build a better mousetrap. You could just continue to make improvements on the product that you have. But nah, too much work. I don't want to do that. I'd rather just rig the game. Easy money, that.
So of course, this could all be seen as a mutual confidence in AI, approval of respective strengths, and Google can come out of this saying that the collaboration was the reason for the layoffs. However, Sasha Yanchin, who has worked in creating financial products for big banks, sees it differently.
You know, Google goes and gives Anthropic $10 billion as an investment, and Google receives the $10 billion back as revenue from Anthropic for using their data centers. Google gets a massive profit without actually having to do nothing. Then Google gives Anthropic the same $10 billion again as a new investment, but at a new valuation that is twice as high as the previous one. Then they receive that money back again in revenue, and they get a massive load of profit again, and so on and so on. Repeat 20 times, and you have a $200 billion investment without ever needing to actually have $200 billion or give it to anyone in the first place.
It's just accounting tricks and money laundering. That's all it is. This is all so incredibly fake and gay. And the fact that the governments have just allowed this to go on, it's mental. This is absolutely mental.
It doesn't pass the sniff test, does it?
No.
But there's a question that has to be asked. With all of this valuation and all of this money flying around, where is the return on investment?
What return on investment? You're just passing the same amount of money around. Nobody's actually making a profit here. You're just taking $10 billion, handing it off to one company, they hand it back, and you just keep passing it between each other. And you call that economic activity.
Large companies like Starbucks, which spent most of 2025 promoting an inventory tool which was meant to be applied to all 41,000 plus locations, have recently dropped the idea because it was a catastrophic failure. The AI would commonly misidentify and mislabel things, so staff had to check everything and it was just a waste of time.
Okay. I mean, AI can learn from its mistakes. I guess they decided it just wasn't worth their time. But then again, at this point, still no substitute for the human eye. Just $20 being passed around by them till they were debt-free.
Duolingo CEO Louis von Ahn promoted the idea of AI-assisted learning. The plan was to cut staff, but the AI-generated output was so bad that the company pulled a 180 and begged for their consumers back. Even Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella.
Who still uses Duolingo anymore to learn a language? Does anybody still use that? I haven't touched Duolingo in years.
Has recently broken foul and said that LLM models aren't enough and are unstable by themselves. He states that there has to be a proper ecosystem where the humans have the ideas and the judgment, and the AI tokens are only used to build things. Another recent development is the loss of faith in total AI replacement of employees.
Companies are hiring for something AI can't do, a review of millions of job listings found. So they're hiring people and say, do these things with AI, only to find out, oh, you can't actually do that with AI. No, Angel Rose, one of the sole remaining users of Duolingo. Apparently you can also learn music and chess on it now. Chess of all things, interesting. Chop that up to poor project management, among other things. I just got sheer stupidity.
Megan Slabinski, District President of Technology Talent Solutions at Robert Half, tells Fast Company, quote, in many cases, organizations have had to
What an absolutely useless company Robert Half is. What an absolutely useless company. They're supposed to be this big talent recruiter. And I'll admit, I've used Robert Half before to try and find a job. Never works out. They're completely and totally useless. If you find yourself in the enviable position of being eligible for some sort of white-collar professional work, like legal and accounting, for example, do not entrust your fate to Robert Half. They are completely and totally useless as a company, and they never deliver. They never deliver.
Assess their expectations, recognizing that while AI can be effective in certain areas, it's not the be-all and end-all solution some initially believed it would be. End quote. This is
irrational exuberance again? I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you.
Arguably more notable among software engineers. Box CEO Aaron Levy warned that AI fanaticism has actually led to major losses, citing a need for human oversight that artificial intelligence can't match. Quote, you can get by for a while by being non-technical about building software, but eventually someone has to understand the thing that got built, has to maintain it,
No, you can't just vibe code your way to the top.
To fix security issues that come up, upgrade the systems beneath it, and so on. That's all jobs.
Yeah, the AI is not going to do that itself. It doesn't have that capability. Not yet, anyway. You're still going to need the human touch. You're still going to need humans in those jobs, And yes, you're going to have to pay them a livable wage.
Some will celebrate because not as many jobs will be taken as first thought. But the celebration is muted. It reasonably leaves a bitter taste in many people's mouths. Not only were people unreasonably fired for an unproven technology, but the very big tech companies that were proclaiming a revolution were seemingly paying each other massive amounts of money to artificially inflate the valuations behind the scenes.
Yeah, they had billions of dollars to pay themselves, but they'll lay off their most essential employees that keep the whole bloody thing running. Make it make sense. Very sus, indeed, very sus. Oh, and to cap it all off, those that did quietly, tacitly admit, oh shit, we fucked up on laying off all these people. Yeah, can you come back? Oh, we're only going to pay you like half or a quarter of what you were making before. Sorry. Yeah, fuck you.
And now we come to one of the biggest examples. Nvidia's alleged backroom dealings with SpaceX. There's enough moving parts here to cause a nosebleed, but they also appear to explain the initial public offering that otherwise doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, SpaceX is basically a rocket ship company. They build rockets that get astronauts and equipment to the International Space Station. They are more than likely going to be the builders of the rockets that get us back to the moon. Which, I mean, look, you can build quite a profitable business off of government contracts. You can. And for a lot of these tech companies, the thing that has been the absolute lifeblood has been government contracts, either from the Americans or from the Europeans, the British, the Australians, the Japanese, and for some, the Russians, the Chinese, etc. You can build quite a successful business off of government contracts. You really can. And it's good, stable income. Investors like to see that sort of thing. I don't know that there's enough government contracts here for SpaceX to justify valuations, market cap, that sort of thing, that would make Elon Musk the world's first trillionaire. Dutch Matrix, welcome in. Why do we need to go back to the moon? Because we can. Because humans are explorers. Humans are achievement-oriented, and the fact that we have not been striving to go to the moon and to Mars and beyond, the end result of that has been societal decline. When humanity had a unified purpose of, let's get into space, let's go to the moon, let's explore beyond the bounds of our earthly confinement, let us be explorers once again. When we had that sort of unified, definite purpose, things were good. Things were really good. But when we took our focus off of things higher than ourselves, on striving to be more than we are, that's when things started to go to shit. Mars makes sense, but the moon, I feel, is not useful. Got to start somewhere. And we've got to make sure that we can get to Mars, and to do that, we've got to get to the moon first. Because stellar humanism. Exactly.
During May of 2026, the 2008 crisis predictor, Michael Burry, expanded his bearish stance on Nvidia in relation.
Michael Burry, I believe, played by Christian Bale in The Big Short. Great film, by the way. Incomplete, though, in its analysis.
To the AI boom of the last decade. He shared a graphic chain diagram connecting pension funds, insurers.
There are good reasons for this. I wonder if he's talking to Jim Cramer. It's all fugazi. How to make tens of billions worth of NVIDIA GPUs disappear from balance sheets in 8 to 12 Byzantine steps.
Specifically Athene, the private credit firm Apollo, and the AI infrastructure between NVIDIA and Elon Musk's xAI. Among the highlighted deals is NVIDIA's sale of $5.4 billion of its most advanced GPUs, the GB200, to a company called Valor. Its reported purpose is to buy and lease data center infrastructure, mostly for xAI. But here's where things start to get questionable. If Michael Burry and other skeptics' accusations are correct, these chips are technically owned and leased by NVIDIA using a not-so-separate company to make it legitimate on paper, meaning that NVIDIA was able to claim $5.4 billion in sales revenue. xAI was able to use the chips to operate Grok, while Valor sits in the middle, serving as a phony bridge to make it all work. In plain English, Nvidia gets to report revenue,
please.
xAI gets to power Grok, and Apollo collects the fees. All while retirees unknowingly finance the $100 billion operation using Athene. They fund it with their hard-earned pensions.
So pensions funded all of this. This lot down here took the money from the pensioners and did a thing with AI. I mean, if it works and it makes money, good on them. But something tells me this is just... I think this is set up to some sort of shell game of other shenanigans.
So looking at SpaceX's IPO, which is floating at about the $2 trillion mark, you look at it a little different.
$2 trillion for SpaceX. Seems a bit much, doesn't it? And just rob people's retirement fund. I mean, if it doesn't make any money, if they can't figure out how to monetize any of this and make money with it, then yes, they will have robbed people's retirement fund. But if they pay that money back with interest in the form of profits, then it's not so bad. It really only becomes a problem if they raided pensioners' retirement funds with no intention of ever paying them back. Who knew this shell game involved an AI pretending to be a hulking gay powerlifter?
Especially right after they purchased xAI for $250 million, which Space...
Hang on a minute. SpaceX purchases xAI. You're all part of the same corporate umbrella. What are you talking about?
SpaceX attributed to its total valuation. I touched on this in a previous episode, but what most people don't realize...
You're just buying and selling yourself.
...is that SpaceX is no longer a rocket company. For their IPO filing, SpaceX filed under the category of computer programming and data processing, and according to the...
Computer programming, data process... I mean, granted, you need those sorts of things to build rockets and get them to the moon and Mars and beyond.
That very filing, 85% of their proposed market is AI, and that's the most charitable interpretation. It's super interesting and eye-opening if you haven't watched that episode yet. But after I released it, SpaceX's very first purchase was the AI coding company, Cursor. And that only solidifies my point. While some people might be quick to call out critics like Michael Burry as conspiracy theories, it's hardly a theory when...
Michael Burry predicted the 08 crash. I would tend to take what he says very seriously. I don't discount him at all.
All of these companies have done it out in the open for everyone to see. While it looks like the SEC has fallen asleep at the wheel, there's nothing explicitly illegal about what these companies have done so far. If it's all what it appears to be, it seems that big tech has found its way to...
If it's all in the up and up, that's one thing, but come on. It's never entirely by the book on the level, is it?
...have its cake and eat ours. They seem to have fabricated demand, given exit liquidity to wealthy investors, and gotten grandma to fit the bill. But ignoring all of that, it just feels like big tech isn't preparing for more growth, but it's just looking for insurance on what's to come. I've always been optimistic about technology and the opportunities it creates. With all of this convenience, learning how to think through problems is becoming more important than ever before. And that brings me to something really cool that Brilliant has been working on. Thanks to Brilliant for supporting Cold Fusion. Okay, back to the episode. So what do you guys think? Can you sense that the market and these big tech companies are behaving strangely? There's a lot of risk, financial imprudence, and not really any care for fundamentals. But maybe that's just me. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below.
No, it's not just you, man.
Anyway, that's about it from me. My name is Dagogo, and you've been watching Cold Fusion, and I'll catch you again soon for the next episode. Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers. Yes. Oh, related video. NFTs are now almost worth nothing. Something when you can just sort of copy and paste and they never really had value to begin with.
Cold Fusion. It's new thinking.
Big tech is acting pretty dodgy. Kind of seems like they're acting in a way of they're not sure if this whole thing is going to keep going. Like the good times have probably come to an end. And so they're preparing for when the music stops.